Hi, I'm Megan Walker, and welcome to 365 Community Chats. So what is this? Well, it's a podcast and YouTube video series where I sit down and chat with members of the Power Platform, Dynamics, and Microsoft community. So sit down, get comfy, and let's catch up with someone. In episode 5 of 365 Community Chats, I sat down and talked with former MVP and now full-time Microsoft employee Nick Doelman. Nick is a person I have admired for years and definitely someone whose blog posts on Power Apps portals are always bookmarked as my favourites. I asked Nick about his transition from community contributor to now part of the portal's documentation team and where he sees his own challenges and opportunities in the new role. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Megan, how's it going?
It's good. It's been way too long, and I love that you're wearing your Scottish Summit 20. Is it the 2021?
It's the 2021.
I don't have my glasses on.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the last time we saw each other in person.
It was, wasn't it? I think so. Because then it was just after that, like, people can't get home as quickly as they thought, and all these things started happening, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was like a bunch of us were out at the pub or something on the night before, and all of a sudden everybody's phones were lighting up that the UG Summit in Spain had been canceled, and we're like, well, why? Like, coronavirus. I'm like, come on, this is gonna be gone.
It's a big deal. It's a cold.
It's gonna be gone in a week. So
yeah, it was absolutely crazy. So I saw that you did something that, although I don't fully understand the significance of it, I'm hoping you can share, but it looked really, really cool and really impressive with not quite Power Platform, but Power related.
Yes. So basically 2 weeks ago I competed in a powerlifting competition. Now, this isn't the first time I've done that. I've been doing this for 9 years now.
Oh, that long. Wow.
So basically, what powerlifting is. When people say, "Oh, you're a weightlifter, like Olympic weightlifting,"
that's what I think. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and Olympic weightlifting is there's two disciplines. There's the clean and jerk and the snatch, which is kind of like taking the bar and kind of lifting it above your head and that kind of stuff. Powerlifting is a bit of an offshoot from that sport. It kind of came to prevalence in like the 60s and 70s, and it's more focused more on kind of explosive strength, and static strength versus the kind of movement of the Olympic lifts. The Olympic lifts are very technical, and to be honest, I would probably screw it up if I tried the Olympic lifts. So what powerlifting is, its disciplines are three lifts. One's the squat, where you go under the bar, you hold it kind of on your shoulders, you go out, and then you gotta squat down to your hips are parallel with your knees. And if you don't quite get down parallel, or you get a little high, then you can get called on depth, because you've not gone low enough, and then you go down and you got to lift it back up again.
Okay.
The second discipline is bench press. Of course, most people know what a bench press is. Like, it's kind of one of those things like, you go to the gym, how much can you bench, and that kind of thing. And then the final one is the deadlift. And deadlift is where there's a barbell on the floor with all the weights. You have to go and pick it up to your waist, basically, kind of arms stretched out. And you'll see that in like strongman competitions and things like that.
Okay.
So those are the three lifts of powerlifting, and how I kind of fell into it accidentally, like most things in life, especially like Power Platform. I basically, once I sort of was getting late 30s, early 40s, I had a small child, and I realized I can't at that time.
It's already.
Not quite. But I was like, okay, I'm getting out of breath going up the stairs. I'm just like, I'm working in an office all day. And this is the thing, like, I find so many of us working in IT, or, this kind of, we're behind a computer all day. We're not getting healthy this way. We need to get up and do something. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. And I used to go to the gym like in my 20s and stuff. And I grew up on a farm, so I was always fairly stronger and fairly healthy for those types of things. But I realized, okay, this is not good. I don't want to, and my family has a history of like heart disease. So it's like, okay, I want to make sure I'm healthy, at least put my best foot forward. So I went to the gym, the running and all the regular exercises. It was okay, but just like running on a treadmill just drove me crazy. I'm not a runner.
Yeah.
it's kind of boring. I got into the weight training. That was a lot of fun. And then the free weights. And then one of the other personal trainers walked by the other day and he's like, "Oh, you're doing quite a bit of weight. We're having a fun powerlifting meet. You should sign up. It's just for fun." I'm like, sure. And that gave me a target to train for. And then when I did it, I absolutely fell in love. I said, I love this sport. This is cool. Gives me a motivation to go to the gym every day, or not every day, like every second day. And
Yeah.
so I signed up for the local association and just started doing it and started going in competitions and finally got to the point where I was able to qualify for the Canadian Nationals a few years ago. And that
Oh,
was a
wow.
big moment. Like it's broken down by weight classes and age groups, and then there's a certain total across the three lifts. So a competition, you do three squats, not one after the other. Like there's a whole flight. You do a squat, then the flight goes through. You get a second and a third, and then your weight you always have to put in an opening weight, and then it always has to go up. Like if you try 200 kilos and it doesn't quite move, you can't drop back down to 190 for your next
Right.
lift. It has to stay the same or go up. And then, so basically, they take the three lifts, the squat, bench, and deadlift. That's a total. You need a qualifying total to go to like provincials and nationals. Most countries are like this, and you need to get those qualifying totals in order to compete further. So
So what was the thing you did a couple of weeks ago?
a couple weeks ago it was a regional championship, and I won't get into the whole structure of all these things, but effectively it was the first meet in 2 years that was being held in the province of Ontario. It's just because of all the lockouts and all the other craziness and restrictions and everything. There's been a few attempts to get a meet going. It just didn't happen because, and then public health was, they have all these rules and regulations, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox.
This
On
is not the podcast for that, Nicholas.
No, I know. Anyways, and just tell people stay healthy and whatever. But I don't know. Anyways, like I said, I'm not gonna get on that soapbox. Like, there's the tinfoil hats and then the people hiding under their bed. I'm in between, so that's where we're at. So, anyways, so that was the Centrals, which is really it's a couple of provinces. It's sort of an intermediary between provincials and nationals. We didn't have provincials in Ontario this year, but they kind of gave a pass for people could go to centrals. Now I didn't have to compete in this in order to go to nationals this year. However, it was something I did want to do. I was just keen to. So,
Well, especially after that long of not being able to do anything, and then to have a live event, which I'm sure doing it in the gym is one thing, and then to have an actual crowd and your peers and and people that I'm sure it's similar to how we have a community. I'm
oh,
sure you've got a community within the powerlifters as well. So
absolutely, and it's very funny how there's a lot of parallels there. People from all different kind of diverse backgrounds, walks of life. Like we have, there's teenagers, both men and women, all the way up to folks in their 70s, and even you'll see someone in their 80s every so often show
wow,
up.
that's awesome.
And from different walks of life, people that work in factories, people work in retail, people work in the health industry. And like I said, you're right. The community is very similar to the Power Platform community because we had come from all different areas and ages, from all different backgrounds. Yet we found a common thing that we all have a passion about, and it's just great to be that. And it was great to see a lot of people hadn't seen in a couple years, and just to hang out and like, how are you doing, how are you faring, and and also getting people's thought processes of where are they in the tinfoil hat to the under the bed scale. And,
It feels like you've got one foot on that. So
I know, sorry.
we're gonna move on from that. And in terms of like, it's a pretty good segue in terms of we talk about this sort of community, and you wrote a blog post recently where you talked about the fact that you have gone to the other side or gone to the mothership or whatever you want to call it, and kind of trading in the MVP status for the blue badge of working for Microsoft. So in terms of the community, if somebody thinks of portals, for me, absolutely, portals and Nick Doelman just kind of like go together. So a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, that's it. Nothing's coming from Nick anymore in terms of content. How would you sort of say that your approach is changing, or is it changing, or tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so we'll just take a quick step back. So So basically when it came to I have joined Microsoft. I am a Microsoft full-time employee. For those of you who don't know, if you're an MVP, you cannot be an MVP and work for Microsoft directly as a full-time employee.
You'll always be in your heart and in my heart as well. So.
Cool. And I mean, it doesn't, and this, not having the MVP status doesn't mean you get kicked out of the community, right? Like so for me, but there was a big concern for me. So anyways, what happened was I wasn't looking for an employment opportunity. I was quite happy. I was independent, doing very similar to what you're doing. I had a few small clients. I was doing a lot of training. I was creating training content. I was working with the crew at 365.training, trying to develop, putting content and courses out there. And even, with everything, I was doing a lot of online training over the past year. Before the pandemic hit, I was traveling, doing training, and I absolutely loved it. And I really miss traveling a lot, and just going to places. But, anyway, so it was all good. And then someone kind of forwarded me this posting saying, hey, they're looking for a content developer for the Microsoft Docs, specifically for portals. And I kind of looked at the job description like, wow, this would be a good fit for me, but do I want to join Microsoft? I had worked for big companies. I worked for small companies. I've run my own company. And like, I don't know, but like I wouldn't have.
And a mental shift as well, isn't it? In terms of like not having any boss to having one of the biggest bosses you could possibly have.
Exactly. So it was almost like, okay, what are my options here? And it came down to this. What basically took the decision was, and of course I did apply. The first non-starter was the job was to be in Redmond, and I wasn't going to move. I'm very happy here in Canada.
Yeah.
We're established here. So I said, I'm not moving. And they're like, that's fine. For this position, you don't need to be here, physically in an office. Like I've worked from home more or less since 2006. And I said, I'm not changing that. They said, okay, that's not a problem. So that barrier was basically removed. And Microsoft, of course, has gone to very much a remote type of working. All of my colleagues basically are still working from home. I know some Microsoft offices are beginning to open up, and they are hoping to get people back in the office. And some people like working in an office, and that works better for them. Absolutely. I totally get that. Yeah. For me, I like working. I have my own office here. It's sort of separate from the rest of my house. It works well for me. So, and that's a great thing about Microsoft. They're very open to accommodating people, as long as, the work gets done. So there was that was the first decision point. The second was, I thought, you know what, if this doesn't work out, or if I don't like it, I can always go back to doing what I'm doing before. I have the network there. That's the thing I have found in, 20, 30 years of working in this industry. Like, we are very fortunate. We're in an area where there's more work than there is people to do the work. And I don't see that changing.
Yeah. I remember before I went out on my own, remember you did that, apologies, I can't remember what you called it. But
the MVpreneur podcast? Yeah. Yes.
So we talked about sort of, I'd just gone out on my own. I remember before I did it, that was my biggest thing. I was like, how am I going to get work? Where am I going to get work from? And everybody, you included, would be like, there's so much work that that's likely never going to be an issue. And other than a couple of months, right, sort of April, May, June last year, after sort of COVID really hit, other than that, it's been exactly like you said. The work it's there. It's just,
and it just keeps.
Which work do you want to do?
It keeps propagating. And as you know, a Dynamics 365 or a Power Platform project never truly ends. There's always new stuff. And I had one client that, I'm transitioned to another colleague of mine, but they had been my client since 2008. We installed CRM 3 or 4 at that time. I think 4.
Wow.
And they, migrated to online, and they basically, their whole system has evolved over time. And it's just, and when I said I was joining Microsoft, they're kind of like, oh, well, we have so much more work for you to do. So there's never, so that being said, back to Microsoft, it was like, you know what, if this doesn't turn out, if this is not for me, then at least I know I can go back. Like they say, sometimes they say you can't go back. Well, I know this is a case I could go back.
You can.
And then I thought, and I don't want to live in regret going, like 6 months or a year from now going, oh shoot, I should have taken that job at Microsoft. Because,
Yeah.
and there's times, as I think all of us that work, in the IT industry, there's ups and downs. There are days where you feel burnt out. I mean, everybody has approached that burnt. Like I think I've said this publicly before. 2013, I had a true burnout. I needed to step away from work. My mind was not operating. Like, I was freaking out over every little thing, over stuff. Now I look back at it, and like, why would I would react that way? But it was
Just because of where your brain gets
exact.
you.
It's a
And it's
mental.
easy to happen. It's easy for us to allow it to happen, I think. But it's then the acknowledgement later on where I'm guessing that it would likely never happen to you again because you see the signs of what got me to that point. So
Exactly. I see the trigger points early and stuff. And that's why I like, there's I had worked for after that, I basically kind of wrapped up my company and worked for a bigger company. But even the bigger company, I always recognized, okay, these are I see my trigger points coming. I don't want to get to that place again. And I was able, again, we all learn, right, over time and different things. So, and that was the thing going to Microsoft. I was like, I said, yeah, like, I want to make sure, I want to at least know that I've tried this opportunity just to see what it's like. And, also working for Microsoft, because we've worked with Microsoft, over the, like, I've worked sort of with them for like 20 plus years on their products or whatever. It was almost like this is kind of like a very familiar space I'm moving into. And it's been 2 months, so it definitely the so far so good. The
good.
team I work with, because I am doing a lot of the documentation for the portals PMs are awesome. Like, these are smart people. They have great ideas. They care. They're open to feedback, and they have some ideas that you need to rein them back on a little bit in terms of real world experience. And then there's things that I've been learning from them as too, like, oh, how about this? I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. So that's been good. What's been interesting is doing things like documentation. I'm doing more than just documentation behind the background. We're looking at training plans and getting people ramped up, how to get them ramped up on portals, especially because, as you know, portals is always traditionally been a very big learning curve to get over. And then once you're sort of over that hump, you're good. But that's always been a challenge. And I know I put some courses together to help, make that learning curve a little bit more smoother. And that's, I think, where Microsoft's trying to go with portals as well, is to make that transition a little bit more smoother, make it much more accessible to people. Try to smooth off some of these rough edges with, these new features that are coming out.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's been really good. What's been a bit of an adjustment is always been sometimes working on longer term projects that, like, they go on for years. We know, okay, we have 3 months to do this. A lot of the stuff that sort of lands on my desk, there's a 2 or 3 day turnaround. Like a new feature is being released, it's going into public preview, or it's actually being GA. We need to update the documentation. We need to add some, update the screenshots, update the steps, make sure it makes sense, maybe break it out a little bit, make sure there's a good flow to it. And then boom, we publish and move on to the next one.
Right.
And that's that's a weird thing. So yeah, I'll have a pretty, like, a big, like a backlog that's growing of things. But most of the time, in terms of my entire spend, I'll probably spend maybe no more than a few days on any given topic and then move on. And that's been a bit of an adjustment for me, who's sometimes had to work weeks on things. There's a bit of a satisfaction to it, because there's nothing more satisfying than you stroking that task off your list, or seeing a document that you've contributed to go live on Docs and people reacting to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you probably saw earlier this week, Microsoft went to public preview for progressive web apps.
I did, yes.
And that has been something that we've been, a big shout out to Ankita, who's the PM on that one. She's amazing. She, is putting this together, and I tried it out and I said, hey, Ankita, like, here's what I think, and here's this and that. She's, oh, that's good feedback. And this is what we're thinking with this. And it was like a good exchange. And then, finally we were, I think originally it was going to be published a few weeks ago. And then there was a few other things going on. And as there is, like, there's a much bigger picture. And then finally we're like, okay, are we releasing this? And then there was some back and forth. Well, we had to add this and remove this, and then a day later, no, we have to add that back again and put this in, and like, okay, and then finally it's like, okay, we're good to go, like, woohoo! And so
Oh,
basically,
I was going to say, I'm glad that you are still able to have that role in terms of giving the feedback, because I was just thinking about in terms of walking away from portals altogether, where you're not like touching it and getting into it and doing all that stuff. That I would imagine that's maybe one of the harder things, is you're
it,
not
it
building and creating and
yeah, it is, and I need to find. I think I need to find a side project or something more for fun stuff to build this. Like to try out these features, and I have been trying to do that the best I can. Like sometimes there's a bit of a time crunch and we can't, but a lot of times too, it's like if I find times and we have an outstanding issue on the docs or something, I'll go in and I'll dig into, okay, is this working, not working? There was some stuff with the web API last week that there was some questions of how it all worked, and I said, okay, I'm going to try it for myself just to see how
right.
far I get. And so in terms of I find I'm more deeper into it, and then I see what the what's coming down the pipeline in terms of these, like, progressive web apps was one, the read access and the portal's web API, the CLI stuff that's coming, and just sort of see those things kind of propagate and come out. That's pretty exciting stuff, because first off, I can give the feedback and I can say people are going to get excited about this. Like, this is something people have been asking for.
Yeah.
And then working on other things and kind of like, I see where you're going with this, but you might want to consider this and that. So I kind of feel sometimes I still put on my MVP hat all the time.
Yeah, but
Um,
I would hope that that's the sort of, we talk about giving feedback as MVPs, and having one of the things that I love the most, which I know a lot of MVPs say, is being able to have that closer relationship to people within the different product teams. So for me, it's either portals or Dynamics 365 marketing, and knowing that there's people on those teams that have a level of trust and respect for us, to know that we're only going to give feedback that we feel strongly and passionately is going to make the product better. Or say, if you put this out, you will be crucified.
yeah,
And I think they're lucky that if you do still keep that hat on, maybe just like twist it to
yeah,
the side a little bit, but if you still do that, because that's where they're going to get not only the value because you're looking at it from that angle, but obviously you're able to then sort of have that look with an eye of, I'm now a Microsoft employee. So it's a very unique balance that you're not going to find unless you take somebody like yourself that's been an MVP. So I think it's a good thing.
yeah. And I hope to continue doing that. And so far, I've been encouraged as well. Like I've had feedback internally is, oh, it's so great to have people like you with field experience and have seen this, because, like, even a discussion I had yesterday, like, or earlier this week, it's like, some of the project managers, like, they're showing me stuff and like, okay, yeah, that's really cool. I said, but here's how I would do it. I'm not saying everybody does it this way, but here's how the majority would do it. And they would go here and they would do this, and like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Um, and again, like, and I think it is important going to the MVP program. It's like, we're not there to be cheerleaders. I mean, sometimes we definitely are. Like, we need to evangelize, and MVPs will
Absolutely.
cheerlead the stuff that's cool and that works well. And but they'll also, from an internal, for the MVPs provide feedback. It's not, and I've said this internally too, because there was some feedback sessions and there was some very honest and kind of critical feedback coming through. And I said, you have to realize these folks are fans of this product. They want it to be the best. This is where it's coming from. It's
Yeah.
not coming from to be
It's a
malicious or
place of
anything.
love. It's like a
Yes,
parent, isn't it? I love you,
yes,
therefore I'm
it's
going to give you the hard, critical
yes,
feedback that you
exactly.
need to
Yeah.
improve.
Yeah, this is not like a Reddit forum where you're just going to like bash on something, right? This
No,
is very
no.
much of, and that I think has been very helpful. So I could hope to continue. And there's a lot of times where, like, oh, we're going to do this and this. I said, be sure to like rope in the MVPs and get their feedback as well, because this is important. And I think that, like, the portals team especially, I think they recognize that, because the MVPs have been great at, used to be only like a few MVPs kind of looking at portals, like, I think myself, Nicholas Hayduke, Colin Vermander, Eliza was doing stuff originally as
Yeah,
well. And but then there's a whole whack of folks now that are, kind of mixing in with the rest with Canvas and Model and all the
absolutely.
rest, right? So
It's a wonderful
yeah,
thing to see, but it's funny when we sort of started talking, you talked about the journey and the ramp up of somebody getting good at portals, so to speak. And I've been working on portals more and more. If I could just do portals all day, every day on projects, that would be the dream for me. I love it. And every time I do a new project, I learn something new and I come up with a newer, better, faster, improved way of doing something. And that, no matter how many courses you go through, no matter how many books you read, videos you watch, is only going to happen when you've done it over and over and over and over again. And
yeah,
I think that's the challenge with it, is that you have to keep doing projects or do a really long project that has all sort of, phases to it. But
yeah,
until
and
you do
that,
that, it's hard to just pick up portals, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
and
not an
that's
easy thing.
that's with everything, right? Like I know,
Yeah,
like for
absolutely.
portals for sure, there's always like if I could go back and redo my first portals project, there's
Oh
a
God.
dozen things I would do
Oh.
differently. But
Wouldn't
that's
you
the
wouldn't
same.
even want to look at it.
Yeah, but it's the same with like even everything else. Like some of the code I've written, like back into the CRM 3 days, or I look at flows. Like I look at some of the Power Automates I even did a year ago, and I'm like, oh, I should have done it this
Let's
way.
just turn my
Or
back on that one.
it's like, oh, I'm so tempted just to drag and change this around to make it better.
Yeah,
But like, okay, it's working. Like, don't fix it if it ain't broke. But I mean,
yeah.
that's with everything, and it's that hands-on experience. And I think anybody starting out in this, first, don't be afraid to start and try things out, and then you become. But again, it's that repeating and hands-on, but it's hard. The Power Platform is so wide now that you can almost spread yourself too thin. You almost need to niche down into some certain
Oh,
areas.
absolutely. You can't
But
be all
yeah,
things to all people on all projects. Otherwise you will be somebody that's so throughout the platform, as opposed to, okay, I know that people will come to me for marketing stuff or portal stuff or customer voice stuff, whatever you want to call
yeah,
it. So I agree. You kind of have to pick a lane, not necessarily stay in it, but pick a lane and be comfortable enough with that, and then have a sort of peripheral level of knowledge on the other things that impact
right.
it, right?
And this is where community is so important as well, because if someone might come to me with a question, let's say on project operations or something, like I can barely spell project
Yeah,
operations, but I said, what, if you know somebody, like they said, yeah, like check out like Auntie's blogs and his content.
yeah,
He knows the person, like, or even like how do you know code components? Oh, it's like, oh well, look at Scott Durrow's videos or take his course, kind of thing, right?
yeah.
Like it's just, yeah, I know, and you know enough to be dangerous, but you also know where to point people towards as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. Where to
You know,
draw the
any
line and know that no, I'm not going to advise you on that because that's not my area of knowledge and expertise. And it's funny because I think when you run a project, I had a call about something and it was to do with um, uh, the marketing app. And then this guy was like, "Can you explain to me why something in Outlook does this?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not an Outlook person, so no." Like maybe Google somebody that does Outlook stuff. But yeah, people think that, oh, you do Microsoft things, therefore you must
yes,
you must know it all. So in terms of, obviously you've had this massive change, and we're kind of headed towards Christmas. I'm hoping that you get a decent amount of time away from work. I was talking to our fake Canadian friend the other day, Scott Durrow. Speaking of him, we've mentioned him a couple of times, and about how Christmas is obviously going to be very different from him. I'm curious for you, what's kind of like either a Canadian tradition or something that you do that you're sort of most looking forward to? Is there anything that would be typically Canadian that you would do?
typically in terms of Christmas.
Yeah, because he talked about going into a forest and chopping down a tree, needing a license for it or something.
Oh, okay, no, so yeah, it's funny. My daughter and I went and got our Christmas tree yesterday.
Okay.
Which it, so I have a so I think I'm not a Grinch. I like Christmas, but I like it in a very
I'm not
condensed.
a Grinch. I don't get soapboxes.
But no, so for me, like if it was up to my daughter, who's 13 and she's an awesome kid, we'd have the Christmas lights up like in October, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
tree up and whatever. Like I said, okay, let's. To me, it's like we need to celebrate holidays in order. We have
I
to
do
celebrate.
agree with that. I very much agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I said like we have to celebrate Halloween, and I said we're not even talking about Christmas until I joke about how Grey Cup is a national holiday in Canada. So those of you who are outside of Canada, the Canadian Football League, which is it's American football, where we throw and run in helmets. The championship is called the Grey Cup. Typically, it's held at the end of November because of everything. The season got shifted this year. The Grey Cup isn't until next week. But I always used to say we can't even talk about Christmas until Grey Cup is over. So this year it's not, because it's coming in 2 weeks in December. We're actually getting a little bit of a head start on Christmas this year. And I also heard there was going to be a run on Christmas trees, so that's actually another reason why we got it yesterday. We go to this farm that has them all pre-cut and everything. Like we get a real tree. That's the tradition in our family. Going back to your original question, because you know me, I go down little rabbit holes and ramble on.
Of course. I'll pull you back out if it happens again.
It's kind of funny because my wife being French Canadian, and coming from her, she has a very large family. There's a lot of traditions there. Obviously, with the pandemic, a lot of those gatherings didn't happen last year, and then now it just also the situation has changed a little bit as well with like her mom passed away 2 years ago. My dad passed away around the same time. So that kind of changes the dynamic in terms of family visits and things like that. So this year we're probably going to her brother's place, which is a new tradition for us, which is on the Gaspésie Peninsula, which is kind of eastern Canada. It's a beautiful place. I've been there in the summer, it's right on the ocean. So yeah, getting kind of excited about that. So not really in terms of tradition, but it's sort of, establishing, new things and things like that.
I think that sometimes that's important. You kind of have to say, you know what, either this isn't working or things have forced this to change. There is nothing wrong with starting. You don't have to have traditions that are, years and years or decades old. You can just start a new tradition. I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? You can kind of do whatever you want. So, well, I hope you and your family have an amazing Christmas and New Year. Hopefully we get to see each other in 2022. But
I hope so too. Like I think you're missing Scottish Summit this year. I'm hoping to go. So I do have a session accepted. I just gotta check with Microsoft to see how all that can work properly. They've already given me a bit of they want to encourage that kind of thing, but of course they have their travel policies and I have what I want to do, so we have to make sure that aligns right. But I fully plan to go, plus a few other things. Hopefully the travel kind of returns, like it's already returning to somewhat normal aside from
I don't know, because who knows, we booked our flights because we're going to America in February, which is when Scottish Summit is, like I said. But now we're starting to think, oh well, actually if we have to go and then quarantine when we get there or something like that.
Yeah, because all these extra testing, like, anyways, I'm just hoping. We got to realize when we're recording this, there is a bit of a panic alert going on. Again, I'm not even going to get on that. Where I think it's off
that soapbox.
Yeah, I know. I should just actually record another podcast completely, but I'll probably get in big trouble for the things I might say.
Something soapbox podcast. But
yes.
Well, thank you for talking to me. I really appreciate it. And I hope, hopefully next year is wonderful for all of us. Better than this
me too.
One, so.
Oh, we'll get there for sure.
We will. Thanks, Nick. Take care.
Thanks, Megan.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of 365 Community Chats. I'm your host, Megan V. Walker, and I'll be back soon chatting with someone else from the Power Platform, Dynamics, and Microsoft community. If you enjoyed this, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for notifications.